Ex-cons of Reddit are child molesters and rapists really treated horrible by other inmates? If the other inmates find out that is why you are there, yes, it can be brutal. They are referred to as tree jumpers. Not sure how that term came about. There is supposed to be confidentiality regarding why you are there, but once you are inside a jail no one is going to listen to you complain about your rights being violated. I had guards come right out and tell me why someone else was in there. They're referred to as tree jumpers because they jump out of trees and grab children. Source: I'm a prison guard. I was locked up for 30 days in a county jail, but in there we had diddlers, and yes, everyone universally hated them. They were hated so much that they had to have their own tier time, which was opposite of everyone else's that lived on that block. So we would get 3 hours of tier time and then we'd lock down so the skinners could get 3 hours and then we'd switch again. Skinners sounds more like a term for zombies or vampires or some sort of creature rather than a diddler. A UK child killer was attacked with boiling water and sugar in prison. My dad is a correctional officer and he told me that last year a diddler was murdered by about 6 other inmates. They tied a bedsheet around his neck and hung the other end of the sheet on the bars of the cell. Some of the inmates who were outside their cells at the time would walk by it and pull it as hard as they could. My dad was at the hospital when the guy finally died and he said that his head swelled up to the size of a pumpkin. Diddlers have a tough time in jail. Something I've heard is that many of the inmates in prison were physically shamed themselves, and that mistreatment and the inability to deal with it effectively started them down the path they're on. This is very true. At my old job I ran a support group at the county prison for drug offenders. Nearly everyone had been assaulted physically or shamed by an adult when they were young. For what it's worth, I've heard that bank robbers enjoy a relatively high status in prisons. Quite possibly because it's anti-establishment, and also because it's damned hard to rob a bank these days. Probably more the establishment thing, I suspect. Friend of mine currently incarcerated has told me in the past that diddlers are pretty much the bottom of the barrel in there and are universally despised by the other inmates. That's true. That being said, anyone can clique up in prison if they want to. Even the diddlers can find a group to hang out with. Spouses in law enforcement. In our jurisdiction, diddlers pretty much have to be put into a protected section, or they will get passed around like a peace pipe. Diddlers obviously would get splattered almost immediately, but I was surprised to learn that even debauchers of adult victims get treated very badly in general population. While in jail, another inmate was there for violating a 12-year-old girl. He was moved to solitary confinement to protect himself. The other inmates had been violating him repeatedly because of what he was convicted of. OP is now crapping his pants as he approaches prison. This is what I wanted to see. My friend's stepfather was in prison for molesting her and he was eventually killed by other inmates. Good. For the most part, yes. A lot of times crimes involving physical shaming or debauchery will either get the choice chance to PC or get PC'd up automatically if what they've done is common knowledge. I've seen a debaucher get worked over, but I've never seen one get violated. I never saw or heard of a diddler that was mainline, but I saw a couple of people that were rumored to have accidentally killed their children. For those two it was more a feeling of anyone was looking for any reason at all to get bones on them. Cop killers aren't necessarily rock stars, but they come in with a little bit of big balls if what they've done is known. You'll still have to stand up at some point. COs aren't really all that high on cop killers. All in all, another poster said it right. Diddlers are the bottom of the barrel. Guys with short eyes are the worst. They're an opportunity to get bones, relieve some tension or relieve boredom. It's pretty much who cares if a diddler dies. Can you explain get bones and short eyes? I assume from I have eyes for short people, aka kids. From the context, I assume to get bones on is to beat the crap out of or to lay your knuckle bones on in the form of punches. Parents have a combined 40 years working in the NIST docs. My dad always said the line is you don't frick with kids or old people. Yup, for that reason they are usually segged. It's the old jailhouse hierarchy. I may have done something wrong, but I'm not that bad. Rapists are really looked down upon too. I mean, everybody's got, or has had, an old lady, right? During the New Mexico prison riot in 1980, prisoners broke into the protective custody unit, which housed diddlers and snitches, and tortured the segregated inmates to death. That wing is rumored to be haunted now. I've never been to prison and the story isn't about a diddler, but the guy was a particularly bad child abuser. My stepmom's employee's kid went to prison for throwing his 2-year-old in freezing showers, locking him up, and savagely beating him repeatedly. Well, kid went to jail and got the crap kicked out of him. Then he went to prison and now he's not getting the crap kicked out of him, since he presumably doesn't going around telling everyone what he did. I think the thing is a lot of people end up in prison trying to support their families. A lot of people join gangs because they want to protect friends and family. A lot of people steal to feed their family. Seeing people who squandered a perfectly good life and harmed the same people you got sent away for trying to protect has got to be frustrating. Other than that, prisoners are largely drug users who are just normal people who use drugs, and understandably probably want nothing to do with child rapists, abusers, murderers. I've heard from prison guards that yes, debauchers and diddlers, especially, are the bottom of the food chain in prison. At the top of the food chain is the strongest fare. The most amazing thing is that these inmates are so violent against diddlers because they themselves had been victims of physical shaming as children and thus they retaliate with the utmost viciousness. And they do this to diddlers who were also all victims of physical shaming as a child. Yes, they definitely are. My ex told me a story about one diddler that got attacked in the yard with razors, hidden in the nose. At the end of the fight, he had his spinal cord severed and his dong cut off. They are also starting to frown on the wife beaters too, but diddlers and debauchers off the top. That is vile. 5 of us beat the crap out of a diddler about an hour after he showed up in our unit. We got the article on the guy and a week later and it turns out he kidnapped, tied up, violated and murdered a 9-year-old boy. We beat the fricking brakes off that punk. I spent an extra month in prison for my actions. No regrets. Here in CA other inmates call them chomos, diddlers, and they are completely segregated from general population. You'll be treated fine. Don't worry. I went to prison for a bit over a decade for child physical shaming charges. For some really stupid stuff I did in my late teens that I really regret. I'm happily married and living a normal life now. Multiple psychologists confirmed that I'm not a diddler or predator. No AMA. Thank you. Across multiple prisons and jails, I was not put in segregated communities. I was always in general population. I was never debauched, stabbed, or assaulted. The few fights I got into were over misunderstandings, and I was never injured. There were other known diddlers there as well. They may not have been popular, but if they kept to themselves, they were left alone. I imagine it varies depending on the personality. I'm not a creepy type like some obvious diddlers that I met, and a lot is in how you carry yourself. Prisoners often have children. A rapist probably won't get killed in prison because their targets weren't children. People are protective of children even if the child isn't their own and even if they are convicted killers. Yes, it happens, which is why child abusers and child rapists go to solitary. Yes and no. My dad works in a jail and he says that they try to keep debauchers and diddlers away from Gen Pop. More often than not they are in different sections of the jail altogether. But every so often one of them gets the ever-living crap beat out of them by someone passing them in the hall. Most of the time they leave them alive to keep the beatings coming. Ends up being a lifetime of beatings that happen at completely random intervals. Sounds like a living heck. Let's just get something straight. The most common punishment for debauchers is debauchery. The only people who get it worse than debauchers are the mentally ill, the disabled, women, and men who can't defend themselves. Gang leaders and VIP cons can go to jail for debauchery and be just fine. Debauchers get it because they don't have backup, they don't belong to a gang and they aren't intimidating. It has absolutely nothing to do with a moral code or what's right. It's debauchers who are in jail debauching debauchers who are in jail. I am not an ex-con, never been arrested for any reason, but my family, they are a mess. The only one I'm close to, my dad spent most his life there. My uncle, great uncle, and both of my stepbrothers, is my stepbrother C. He and his brother met us when they were 9/12, and were already in gangs and selling drugs on the street corner. We actually joke about how his life was the Brady Bunch when he would come to stay with me, but with his own mom things were bad. I've asked a lot of questions and from what I'm told they usually have their own ward. They do have people who try to get into the ward. Usually it's also a ward for inmates with medical or mental issues, to kill others there. He has told me a few stories of being in general population and watching someone who abused a child or elderly get stabbed or get beat up. According to court documents, his brother was in a holding cell waiting for processing and did some damage to another inmate who was charged with abusing his 4-year-old daughter. Usually the inmate will keep to themselves or not tell others why they are in. They are looked upon very poorly. C said he had even seen people look the other way while it happened. Debauchers get treated like crap until they get moved into the protective custody unit with the rest of the debauchers. I've never met a cop killer, but when you're watching the news in jail and you see a cop got killed, everyone cheers and claps. So I am assuming they do get praised. One school of thought regarding this is that most criminals come from broken abusive homes themselves and are basically lashing out at those that are that same as their tormentors that ruined them as people. Not me, but my dad. We live in the southern US. He was in a communal holding cell for drug possession. The officer brings in a man who was caught violating his 5-year-old daughter. The cop put him in the cell and as he was leaving announced that he was a diddler who was violating his own daughter. The other men in the cell beat him, shoved a shampoo bottle up his butt, and used him as table to play cards on and put cigarettes out on his back. Yet it gets bad for them if the inmates learn of what they did. I remember watching an episode of Lock Up or something where they said that a lot of these diddlers have unusually good people skills, manipulation skills, and they can often end up being seen as father figures and even leaders in some prisons, which makes them doubly dangerous. I've heard differently than everyone else. From what I've heard, diddlers have friends up the butt in prison. My friend who just got out of prison had a diddler as a roommate. He said he extorted him. The diddler would have to buy him stuff from the canteen or risk getting his butt beat. You need better friends. Here's a story of a guy who went to prison breaking about violating a 14-year-old girl. They disemboweled him and I think broke a broom handle off in his butt or something, then cleaned up and went for breakfast. Convicted felon here. Spent 27 months in federal and military prisons. People with crimes against children are universally hated. The nicer inmates would tell them to PC up, check themselves into protective custody, if they didn't want anything to happen to them. Anybody see the episode of Locked Up Abroad? This diddler was bragging about what he did to another inmate through the AC unit. Another inmate told him if he didn't shut up he was gonna break out and kill him. Well, he didn't shut up and ended up breaking the toilet off and breaking the door window, climbed through and tried to break into the guy's cell. The diddler started crying, begging for God to help him. I watched an old man get his skull busted open with yellow mop bucket wringer while I was locked up in Mississippi. The guard told us he was in for chili pea. We thought he was dead when they dragged him out, but later we found out he survived at the hospital, but with brain damage. This wasn't even a prison. It was a county jail. Can only speak for Australian prisons, but holy crap, yes. Diddlers have a really hard time in prison here. Lots of fathers who love their kids in prison. Bikies, motorcycle gang members, banditists, Hells Angels etc. Really don't take kindly to diddlers. Criminals are human too and they sort of view crimes in different ways. Drug, gang, white collar crimes are a bit more tolerated than, let's say, crimes against your fellow man, especially women, children or the elderly. Most criminals might understand if another inmate isn't for selling drugs, or robbing a bank, or even scheming people out of millions of dollars, because in most of their eyes it's a dog-eat-dog world and you must do what you have to do to survive. However, there is no reason for a person to hurt a woman, child, elderly, or go on murder sprees unless they are just completely sick. Just like us, most criminals don't think they are fit for this world. Number. Source. 5. 1/2 years in Arkansas prisons. Boyfriend is a CO. He has told me stories about what guys who hurt kids go through inside. It's pretty brutal. Honestly, I think they deserve it. This always really annoys me. Every time there's a despicable crime reported, a lot going on in the UK at the minute with child abuse and chilli pea among public figures coming to light, everyone is all kill them, burn them, and I'd love just 5 minutes alone with him and hang them in public. They should be put in prison. We like to say we live in a civilized society and yet people are talking like savages. People say, well, they don't deserve to be treated in a civilized way. Were they victims? They don't deserve a place in society. Well, they don't have a place in society. They are in prison. And of course they treated their victims horrifically, but won't treating them the same way be somewhat hypocritical if nothing else? Also, the people that claim they would beat them, torture them etc. Would you really? You'd have to be a little sociopathic to enjoy doing that to someone who hasn't ever personally harmed you or anyone you know. Just some random stranger. Stop talking like a wannabe hardman from a pub. Then there's the people who aren't quite as direct with their intentions, saying things like, well, they'll get what they deserve from the other prisoners. How is this any more civilized? We don't live in medieval times. Public hanging and murder inflicting pain for entertainment is behind us. Or, it should be. Of course what they have done is horrible, but I think we have a duty as a society to act like what we say we are. And the prisoners who do harm the diddlers etc. Why? To gain respect in prison or to feel like a hero? Because they are definitely, is somewhat subtly, praised. It just seems really strange to me. I know, morally, it's hard to look at it objectively and not think of the worst punishments possible for them, but regardless of what they've done, it seems so downright backwards to wish on them what they've done to their victims. Should we steal from thieves and tax evaders, or have a government-employed rapist to have their way with convicted debauchers? How is beating, torturing, murdering prisoners different? Rant, I guess I haven't made this very clear. I was talking about people who haven't been personally affected by the original crime. Of course I can understand if it was their child or other relative etc. who was the victim. I worked in a prison for about 6 months. Even many of the prisoner-facing staff aren't privy to inmates' criminal history. They just get ratings in various categories, encoded into prisoners' PID number, and that risk flag is the most telling information they get. But even that is extremely vague and could mean anything from ex-gang member to crimes against children. The secrecy around criminal history is so extensive that their profiles on each criminal also has a field called ongoing claim, which is basically what criminals tell their peers they did to get into jail. So, in short, I can't see this happening, because I can't imagine prisoners knowing which of their peers was incarcerated for those crimes. If it was the case that someone had been on TV or it was commonly known what they'd done, they would be put in a different facility. Never fully grasped that logic. Not standing up for the diddlers, but how exactly is the criminal who kills a parent and leaves a child helpless, or beats someone into a coma, or robs someone of their hard-earned money, any better? I get that there's a hierarchy, but at the end of the day, a criminal is a freaking criminal. Unless you're in there for a small crime, you can't really point the finger at someone else and say you're worse than I am. You can't really point the finger at someone else and say you're worse than I am. Sure you can. There are reasons, not good ones, but extenuating or mitigating circumstances for the crimes you mentioned. You rob because you need cash. You beat someone because they've done something to you. Same with killing. No one can ever really justify freaking a kid. It's just wrong, no matter what happens. I went to jail and then California state prison as a teen. In jail, the sheriffs would purposely move diddlers or baby killers or snitches into general population and either announce their crime or shoot a kite. This is the only time that every single race gets together. All of the shot callers set up a line to go at it with the offender. You can hurt that person in any way, but you can't kill him. Killing him is reserved for the ones that got the word to do it. It's a privilege to do it, in their mentality. I remember them moving a 40-50-year-old white guy into the dorms while my first month there in jail. The guy looked confused. He had a blue band and was clearly PC'd up. He stepped in, click goes the door behind him. He looks around and bangs on the door for the sheriff to let him out. He's in the wrong building. An announcement came over the loudspeaker that we have a baby killing diddler in the house. What happens next is something I am sure you can guess. These guys go to jail, prison, and get a few years for mentally and physically destroying a person's life, scarring them forever, while some guys get life for acid or weed trafficking. What kind of system is it? All fricked up that even the guards want vigilante justice. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.